If I've heard it once, I've heard it a million times. People constantly want to tell us about how restrained and well-trained our military is. Politicians love to remind us that our troops understand their duty and would never follow illegal orders. But just last year, during his confirmation hearing, Pete Hegseth, nominee for the Secretary of Defense, or now the Department of War, I guess, was asked by Senator Slotkin if he would refuse illegal orders from the president. And he couldn't even give a straight answer. He just kept saying, "I reject the premise that the president would give illegal orders." But that's just not how this works. And it's not just politicians. You hear this everywhere. Don't worry about authoritarian overreach. Our military personnel are trained to recognize illegal orders. They swear an oath to the Constitution. They'd never go along with unconstitutional commands. It's a story people love to tell because it makes them feel safe. But here's what actually happens when you look at the history and science of how our military systems really work. Military orders are clear, direct instructions from a superior, and the expectation is immediate and total compliance. Because most people don't understand this system at all, the entire military structure is built around this chain of command. Orders flow down from the top, and questioning or disobeying those orders carries serious consequences. Soldiers are psychologically conditioned from day one to suppress their inner individual judgment. As military psychologists put it, this deep programming often suppresses individual morality and emotions, making personal appeals to soldiers' humanity largely ineffective. The system specifically creates what researchers call suppression of individuality and moral flexibility. Soldiers are trained to set aside their personal beliefs that might interfere with them following the orders that they're given. They learn emotional regulation techniques to compartmentalize their feelings so they can perform those tasks that conflict with their personal ethics. And questioning orders it's not allowed. Article 92 of the Universal Code of Military Justice makes disobeying lawful orders a serious crime, and the maximum punishment can include dishonorable discharge, loss of all pay and allowances, and up to 2 years in prison. Even minor insubordination gets punished with reduction in rank, extra duties, restriction to base, or forfeiture of pay. The message is clear. Don't question, just obey. And because troops can't question an order, it also means they can't question where that order came from. Think about what that means in practice. If your superior gives you a command, you have to assume it's a legal order. You have no right, no practical ability to investigate whether that superior was told to say that by someone higher up, or if the order originated from a constitutionally questionable place. Your only responsibility is to obey the person directly above you. And if you disobey, you would likely be in a whole load of trouble, likely facing court-martial. This creates a system where, for the individual soldier on the ground, any order from their direct superior is functionally a legal order, because refusing it is the only clear violation of the law that they can commit in that moment. Why do people, good, regular people, follow orders they know are wrong? Back in the 1960s, a scientist named Stanley Milgram did an experiment to find out. He brought in volunteers and told them, every time the person in the next room gets an answer wrong, press this button and you'll give them an electric shock. The shocks weren't real, but the volunteers didn't know that. They thought they were actually hurting someone. But here's the shocking part. About 2 out of those 3 people, they kept pressing that button all the way to what they believed was a lethal level. Just because someone in a white lab coat told them, you must continue. They didn't want to do it. You could see them sweating, shaking, but they did it anyway because an authority figure said so. And that's just regular people in a psych lab. In the military, the pressure is way stronger. Uniform, strict hierarchy, your career and your family's financial security on the line. This isn't just a theory. We've seen it happen with American troops. In Vietnam, there was the My Lai massacre. U.S. soldiers were ordered to kill civilians, innocent women, children, elderly people. And they did it for hours. Out of dozens of soldiers involved, almost nobody was punished. The one person who went to jail served his time under house arrest, not even in prison. More recently, at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, the soldiers tortured and abused prisoners for months, and most said that they were just following orders from intelligence officers. Of approximately 410 personnel investigated for detainee abuse, only 1/3 faced any kind of disciplinary action. And those were mostly just low-level enlisted personnel, not the officers who actually created the policies that were carried out. The pattern is always the same. When prosecutions happen, they target low-level personnel while protecting the senior leadership. And here's something that we should all be worried about. Recent studies found that 80% troops say that they understand their duty to refuse illegal orders. Sound good, right? But the same survey found that 62% would support using nuclear weapons on civilian cities, and 59% agreed that they would shoot unarmed civilians during protests. So we have troops who claim they know the rules, but would still commit clear war crimes if ordered to. This creates a paradoxical situation where 80% claim to understand the duty to refuse illegal orders, yet 60% would carry out actions that clearly constitute war crimes. So why do people follow bad orders? It's not about being evil or weak. It's about survival. In the military, refusing an order is dangerous. It can mean the end of your career, losing your family's health insurance, or being labeled as disloyal. Military families face unique financial pressures. Military spousal unemployment is 5 times the national average, and federal employees with military connections are being terminated en masse under current policies. The risks aren't limited to just losing a paycheck. If the country starts slipping into authoritarianism, history warns us it could be a lot more than a job at stake. In authoritarian regimes, the military isn't just pressured at work. The stakes get much higher. Dissent isn't just punished with job loss. It can mean surveillance, legal harassment, or even violence against the person or their loved ones. Authoritarian governments use families as leverage, threatening, blacklisting, or worse, targeting relatives of those believed to be disloyal. Families of those in the military have been threatened, blacklisted, or worse if their relatives are labeled disloyal or refuse their orders. So when people say all that's at risk is your career, remember, once lines are crossed, history shows that it can put much more on the line, sometimes freedom, safety, or worse. Now, here's the part nobody wants to talk about. Who decides what is an illegal order? The courts. And those decisions only come months, if not years, after the fact. By the time anybody says, hey, that order was illegal, the damage is already done. I mean, let's look at what's happened recently. Trump deployed the National Guard to LA. Federal judges ruled that that was illegal, but I mean, that was in June, and this is in September. The judge found the administration's actions violated posse comitatus, but troops had already been following those orders for months. Even with a clear court ruling, the Department of Justice immediately appealed, meaning troops could continue operations until the entire appeals process was over. So for a soldier to refuse any order in real time, it has to be what lawyers call manifestly illegal, meaning obviously wrong to any reasonable person. And that's an incredibly high bar that's almost never met in confusing high-pressure situations. As one Israeli legal precedent described it, illegal orders must have a black flag flying over them with illegality that pierces the eye and revolts the heart. Notably, in the 45 years since this ruling was established, not even one single soldier was protected by a military court for refusing to obey a command because it was a black flag command. We don't even have to guess how federal employees will behave under pressure. We can see it happening right now. The Trump administration has removed employment protections from federal workers and conducted mass layoffs affecting nearly 300,000 employees. FBI agents are literally packing up their desks in fear of mass firings. Justice Department officials are being pressured to identify colleagues who worked on politically sensitive cases, and agencies are ramping up pressure on workers to quit voluntarily. Federal agencies like ICE are carrying out controversial actions, raids on schools and hospitals without precedent, detaining U.S. citizens by mistake, and using masked officers in ways never seen before in American policing, all the while following directives from the administration. These actions face significant legal challenges, but agents continue following these orders because their livelihoods depend on it. Workers continue following controversial directives despite legal challenges because they need their jobs. Military families need financial stability just like everyone else. There's a fundamental structure problem. The same chain of command that issues controversial orders is typically responsible for who's prosecuting those who follow them. Senior leaders who give illegal orders aren't going to court-martial subordinates for following the orders they gave them. Military justice depends on those empowered by the same hierarchy that issued the original orders. This creates an obvious conflict of interest and explains why prosecutions are rare and usually target scapegoats rather than the actual decision makers. Historical precedent shows few court-martials or prosecutions following controversial presidential or command decisions, partly because systemic accountability relies on those empowered by the same hierarchy. Military training specifically creates conditions that maximize compliance through what psychologists call psychological conditioning. Chain of command respect, soldiers are conditioned to view orders from superiors as directives that must be followed without question. The diffusion of responsibility, how orders flow through multiple command levels, so individuals feel less personal accountability. Soldiers see themselves as agents carrying out someone else's wishes rather than taking personal responsibility for their own actions. Soldiers are trained to think in terms of the greater good, which can justify morally ambiguous actions. Years of military training create deep identification with the military hierarchy. And military personnel face the same human motivations as everyone else: need for steady income, benefits, desire for career advancement, social pressure from peers and superiors, fear of being labeled disloyal. So why do people still cling on to this myth? Because we Americans want to believe that our military would never participate in authoritarian actions. Acknowledging that most soldiers would likely follow illegal orders creates an uncomfortable feeling for people. Many people don't understand that court rulings determining illegality typically come long after orders are executed. We hear stories about rare individuals who refused orders, but these exceptional cases mask the reality that the majority complied. Both military and civilian institutions have strong incentives to maintain the narrative that safeguards exist and work effectively. Acknowledging systemic failures would undermine institutional legitimacy. Look, this doesn't make military personnel morally inferior, it just makes them human. But the evidence is overwhelming. Psychological research on obedience to authority shows that authority figures in institutional settings maximize obedience. Historical precedent from American military actions demonstrates widespread compliance with illegal orders. Current behavior of federal agencies under pressure shows employment concerns override legal and ethical concerns. And the structural realities of how legality is determined mean court rulings could come too late to prevent illegal actions. Military training specifically conditions personnel to suppress individual judgment and follow orders. When a corrupt administration issues illegal orders, most military personnel will follow them, just as civilian federal employees are doing right now. The real protection against authoritarian abuse doesn't come from assuming soldiers will refuse illegal orders. It comes from preventing corrupt leaders from gaining power in the first place. It comes from strengthening our institutional checks and balances. It comes from creating independent oversight mechanisms, from ensuring rapid judicial review of military deployments, from protecting whistleblowers who report illegal activities. The stakes are too high to depend on individual moral courage when systems and institutions are specifically designed to discourage it. We must face this uncomfortable truth. We have a corrupt administration. The military will likely follow whatever orders they're given, regardless of legality. We need to acknowledge this reality. We need to build protections that our democracy needs. This comforting myth that soldiers won't follow illegal orders isn't just wrong, it's dangerously wrong. And it's preventing us from having the real conversation we need to have about protecting ourselves and our democratic institutions.